The first thing I'm going to do, if I'm going to concept, let's say like a, I don't know, an armored chest plate on this dude, I would go ahead and duplicate him off. And because I'm just concepting, I want to stay loose. I don't want to start like poly modeling stuff and putting in edges, and that takes way too long for me. I want to get in there and get stuff done quickly and just get it fleshed out, get the idea out, then refine it from there. So how I'm going to do that is like I did. I duplicated it off. Now when I duplicated this thing off, this eyeball was off automatically. If it's not off, just go ahead and have the second one selected and turn the eyeball back on for your original mesh, because what we're going to do is we're going to see the original mesh and then we're going to see what we're sculpting on top of that. So before I start sculpting, what I'm going to do is actually go down here to the deformation menu and do a inflate of -1 or 2, or just kind of deflate it a little bit. So under inflate, I'm going to do like -2 and hit enter. Sorry about that. I was doing all this talking about turning on and off subtools. I didn't realize I had solo on. So make sure solo is off. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And let's go back to where we just duplicate. Actually, you know what? Delete this guy, take this one, duplicate him off. So we're back where we started. We have solo off this time. So now I'm going to go down here to inflate, and I'm going to do like -1, -2. Let's do -2 and hit enter. You're going to see he went darker. Actually, what he did was kind of shrink down. If I turn on transparency, you're going to see, well, not really well. There's a guy inside of there. If I hit solo on this one, you're going to see I basically just shrank him down just enough to where he's sitting underneath this shell of my original guy. So what that's going to allow me to do is kind of sculpt, and as I sculpt, is going to pull up through him and start showing up. So let's go ahead and just do that. I'm going to hit go to my clay tubes brush, and I'm just going to start brushing some details on. And you're going to see as I'm brushing this on, it looks like I'm just pulling up a brand new mesh out of nowhere. It's magic. But what I'm actually doing, if I hit solo, is I'm actually just sculpting on this original guy. Only it's giving me the visual representation of if I'm actually just adding something new. So I'm going to be, we'll sculpt a backpack on this dude, and we'll go ahead and I'll go all the way down his belly. There. So we got kind of a flak jacket kind of thing on him. And again, I'm keeping it loose. I'm not worried about like, well, do I need to build in? Let me go grab my polygon modeling tools and start, what shape does this need to be? I'm going to go hit L to go out of lazy mouse mode. I'm just going in here and finding some shapes that I like. Maybe this kind of dips in here, and maybe this goes way up. So I'm going to grab my standard brush. I'm just going to pull this way out here. And since I pulled out this lip, what I can do, and because the original mesh was a Dynamesh, if I go down here to my geometry settings, Dynamesh is on. My duplicated mesh has Dynamesh as well. So I'm just going to control drag, re-Dynamesh this outer setting here. Grab my clay brush, I'm just going to build this up. So let's build up a little platform here. And because I didn't have backface masking turned on this thin mesh here while I'm using my big fat clay brush, it's doing this kind of stuff. If I Z-remesh or if I Dynamesh this, it's going to do something nasty. So I want to make sure I go over here, and this is why I usually have my brush menu loaded up over here. I'm going to go to auto masking, open that up, turn on with my clay brush selected, turn on backface mask, and while I'm here I can go like cycle through my brushes and go, okay, here's my clay tubes, here's my trim, here's my standard, what else do I use? Clay standard, I don't know, that's enough. So all the ones you want to use except for your move brush, we've talked about that, where your move brush kind of acts strangely when you have your backface mask turned on, so leave that one alone. But for my clay brush and all my other ones I'm going to use, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. So now I know I can go in here and sculpt without molesting the other side. So then I'm going to go in here, maybe grab a trim dynamic, hold down Alt and kind of sharpen these up a bit. Go ahead and trim those back and just Dynamesh as you go, as you see fit. Let's go ahead and get rid of this part here. I don't like this part anymore. So we're going to give him kind of that kind of look. And again, I'm not really even thinking much about design or concepting here. I'm just kind of making interesting shapes that'll maybe throw us some problems as we move forward, so I can kind of work my way through them with you guys while you guys are watching, because that's also not very fun. If I do something that's perfectly set up, that's like, this will work perfectly every time if you do exactly this. Well, what if you don't do exactly this? You're going to run into some problems, and I'm hoping to catch as many of those as possible, because problems are not fun to deal with. So we're going to pop some little pods off his back here. I'm going to go to polish these down, smooth them out a little bit. We can go ahead and again, just on this back, we want to build a lip up. I'm going to use standard brush here. That is, the intensity is pretty high on that standard brush. I'm going to bring it back down to like 37. And then we can use our clay brush on this side. We can build this up. We can keep this side maybe flat, or maybe even dig this in a little bit, or go into our H polish brush, hold down Alt, and just kind of straighten these out. And then let go of Alt, and then we can kind of polish these up. So really quickly, we can start getting an idea of what our character is going to look like here. And we can go ahead and just put some buttons over this. There we go. So some buttons on the side. We've got this piece here. Now let's say we like this, and I want to start working on this thing separately from his body, because remember, this thing is like actually part of this mesh, and you don't want the rest of the stuff hanging around, taking up memory, and it's gonna end up getting in your way as you keep working. So let's go ahead and separate this thing out. And the fastest, easiest way to do that for me is to just go ahead and I guess mask this thing out and give it a poly group. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got this thing on him, but we want to separate this thing off, so into its own thing, so it's not attached to another version of him. So what I'm going to do is hit Control W just to re-verify. See, if I go here, you're going to see I have a whole bunch of polygroups on this guy that I actually inherited from his Z-sphere base body. So I'm going to hit Control W, just because if I'm masking and polygrouping, I want to make sure that my polygroups are nice and clean. So this is going to be all one polygroup now. I'm going to go into solo mode here, check them out. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to go through and just really quickly mask these pieces here, and you're going to want to mask all the thickness and all the stuff that you've built. And this isn't just a t-shirt. A t-shirt I would actually do differently, and we'll get into that in a second. So I'll give this guy a pair of pants and a t-shirt and gloves and all sunglasses and all the stuff that I can think of that I'll use as many tools as possible, or as many techniques as possible, I should say. So this technique is just doing very quick concepting, and I would do this exact same thing for shoulder pads, shoulder plates, leg pads, gloves, all sorts of things, because you can go through and really quickly concept these things out, and then once you get them concepted up to a certain point, you can start breaking them off and refining. Now, as I start breaking things off and refining, we're going to run into having a lot more subtools than we have previously. Like up to this point, we've usually had 1, 2, or 3 subtools, and it's easy enough to go in here and spine them. You don't even have to rename them. I mean, you can just go in there and just see what they are, and you can kind of hover over them and get a bigger look at what they are. But eventually, we're going to be getting into the hundreds of subtools, and I'll bring in another character that's quite a few subtools, and I'll show you how to navigate and work around the subtool organization limitations. So now that we've got that thing all masked out, I'm going to go into solo mode, and you're going to see we just masked out where his little flak jacket was. So if I go into polyframe here, I'm going to hit Control W, which it'll group masked, clear mask. So it grouped what was masked and then it cleared my mask, which is exactly what I wanted. Now I don't need the rest of him, so I'm going to hold that Control Shift, tap his little flak jacket, go ahead and go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Now I hate going over here and doing that. That's why I've got Delete Hidden right here in my little special menu I have assigned to a hotkey. Just FYI, if I do accidentally go in here and do that, I'll show you where it is, but I'm also going to go in here sometimes too, just to save me some time. So I go out of solo mode. Now this thing I can just continue to sculpt on if I want to, but it's a single paper thin mesh, and Dynamesh doesn't really like being a single paper thin mesh. So what it likes to do is close holes and then re-Dynamesh your entire object. So if I go ahead and just re-Dynamesh this thing, it's going to go ahead and close these holes for me, and it gives them a new poly group. And now if I hit go out of solo mode, you're going to see he still has a flak jacket. When it closed holes, it didn't do it in a smart way necessarily. I mean, it did it as smart as a computer is, which is basically, here's my open hole, I'm going to put some quads on it and close it off for you. Now if I go out of solo mode, you're going to see, he kind of dipped into my armpit there, didn't really want that, but that's easy enough to go ahead and clean up. Now I'm going to show you some ways around that where you can close these holes smarter on different objects, but that'll work for now. So you can actually go in here and just kind of clean this stuff up and then re-Dynamesh. And if you want to play it extra safe, you can go ahead and do Control W to make this all one poly group, and then re-Dynamesh, and then you're good to go. So just Control W to make that all one.